Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well. Now, I know it's been quite a while since my last video, and I do apologize for that. I have been spending a lot of time myself working on my strategy, both my entry requirements and also more specifically my trade management. And I've really been focusing on making sure that I'm maximizing my profits from the market, as well as, trying to boost my overall win rate. And unfortunately, that's meant I just haven't had as much time as I would have liked to both record and upload videos. So I do apologize for that. But moving forward, I am hoping to begin much more regular uploads. And I'm thinking of more videos similar to this, where I will do, trade breakdowns, also weekly forecasts. And hopefully I'll be able to start releasing these a lot more regularly, perhaps even weekly, just depending on what I have going on. But that won't be available until April, because next week I am going to Australia for a month. And yeah, I won't have any time whilst I'm in Australia to record or upload any videos. So it will be once I'm back in April that I'm going to try and, increase the amount that I'm uploading. So if any of you guys have any suggestions, if you want more videos like the one I'm just about to do, where I'm giving you full sort of trade recaps, if you want more forecasts, then I can do that on the weekend. So you have a forecast just when you're about to start your new trading week. Just let me know in the comments. Also, if you have any topics you want me to go over, anything to do with risk management, psychology, specific entries, literally anything. If you've got any ideas, as I say, just let me know in the comments. But yeah, without further ado, let's jump straight into this video. I'm going to give you a full breakdown of a trade we took last week. Now, as you can see, this was taken on Thursday during London session, and we did close the trade with a final RR of 22. Now, I didn't hold the majority of my position until 22R. I think I had 25% remaining until this final TP, but it was a really, really good trade. And as you would have seen on Instagram, if you are following me, I did talk a little bit about it, but I wanted to give a sort of full breakdown. So we'll start on the higher timeframes. We'll go from the weekly and we'll go all the way down to the M1, which is where we took this entry from. And yeah, I'll explain my whole thought process, which entry we took, possible other entries you could have taken if you missed the one that we're going over here, and also the best way to sort of manage your trade to make sure that you're maximizing those profits. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump straight into it. So guys, I've just played back price to the morning of Thursday around 7 a.m. This is usually when I'm starting my trading day, just as Frankfurt's opening. And yeah, I'm going to take you through my full analysis I did for this trade. And of course, that's going to start on the higher timeframes. Now, I don't usually go to the weekly every single day. I usually do that at the very start of the new trading week, as not much is going to change sort of intraday. But yeah, I'll give you a very quick overview of the weekly. As you can see, we do have a larger bearish trend. This is our swing structure. So you can see we've recently had that swing break of structure to the downside. We've seen some clear internal structure form to the upside, and that was to facilitate our swing pullback. And we've quite recently seen our internal structure flip bearish. As you can see, we had that bearish internal break of structure. We've seen price pull back nicely to our weekly internal extreme supply. As you can see, that sort of very last candle that caused that bearish internal break of structure. And we're currently seeing a fairly nice reaction from this level. And so the anticipation coming into this week would be for price to look to target our weekly low, bit of a tongue twister there, our weekly low. As this hasn't achieved anything, we do have this internal bearish structure now. And also, quite interestingly, if we take our tool here, we can see that price has pulled back to mitigate the EQ of our swing range, which provides even more confidence that our swing pullback could be over and the price might be ready to not only target our weak internal low, but also our weak swing low. So as I say, not too much detail on the weekly. I tend to not sort of over confuse stuff. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of mixed signals depending on the amount of timeframes that you look at for your analysis. So we'll jump down to the daily, and that's going to show us something fairly similar where we had clear bullish structure. As you can see, our swing structure was making a series of higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows. We then saw price break through our higher low, which meant we formed a new lower low. We therefore had a bearish trend change. We had some nice internal structure. As we can see, price was making these internal higher highs, internal higher lows. We then saw price mitigate our weekly supply. That's this zone here. We also had it refined to a small sort of fractal wick here that price has mitigated. given a really nice reaction from. And coming into this week, we saw price eventually give us a internal bearish break of structure. So as we can see, our daily internal is now bearish, which means it's aligned with our swing structure. Again, this is providing even more confidence that price wants to move to the downside. And after this break of structure, or internal break of structure, we've seen price pull back into this very small flip zone. This flip zone did technically lead to that internal break of structure. So it's possible we see price push into this zone before continuing to the downside, but we could also see a larger internal pullback depending on what price wants to do here. So again, not too much detail going in on this time frame. Main thing is that we've just very recently had that internal break of structure and price is pulling back into this nice little flip zone we have there. Going down to the 4 hour now, and again, it's going to be a lot clearer. As you can see, this is that daily supply zone we were talking about. We haven't actually mitigated it yet. That was just because, unfortunately, on TradingView, they always seem to play the entire daily candle, which is quite annoying. So if we ignore this sort of Thursday candle, because that's the day we're going to be doing now, we would have come in on Thursday morning seeing this candle here, and we would have seen this candle beginning to form, but we wouldn't have seen it push into that daily flip zone yet. But definitely a zone we would have been looking for. And again, we could refine that on the 4 hour to this sort of fractal supply zone. So you can see, I think this was formed during CPI news. So you can see a very, very large candle, very large wick also. And this flip zone here also led to our 4 hour swing break of structure. So you can see we did have bullish 4 hour swing structure. We had very clear internal structure, bearish internal structure to facilitate our swing pullback. We did see a bit of messy price action. As you can see, our internal did flip bullish, providing us a signal that the swing pullback might be over, but then we could see that structure continue to the downside, and we have eventually seen a swing trend change with that bearish swing break of structure. So again, coming into this morning, we can see that we have recently made both a swing break of structure and an internal break of structure, and we'd be expecting price to retrace perhaps into this supply zone. We could see our internal structure continue to the downside. So we could see price make a small pullback into this zone and continue, or of course, we could see a much deeper swing pullback if price did want to give us that swing pullback straight away. So that's, again, pretty much all I was looking for on the 4 hour, not too much analysis to do. We do have a very small change of character within here. I haven't marked it out just yet, but I will mark it in here. As you can see, we do have a very small fractal break there. So we have a change of character on our 4 hour, which also means we have a very, very small 4 hour demand zone within here. Not the most significant, but technically a valid demand zone to mark out. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, anticipation coming into this morning would be for price to perhaps push up into our daily supply zone, possibly our 4 hour refined supply zone, which we've refined to that fractal wick that led to both the swing break of structure and the internal break of structure. And obviously we might see price push down into this 4 hour demand first, but that's something we'll have to wait for and see on our lower time frame. So now we can jump down to the M15. And as you can see, our M15 structure, our swing structure has just flipped bearish. We did have a very messy range here. You can see we had a really large swing break of structure, We had quite messy price action within here. Our internal structure was bullish to facilitate that swing pullback. We did have a bearish trend change. We then saw it flip bullish again. And this happened quite a few times where we were provided with false signals that the swing pullback was over, which can sometimes happen where we see this sort of messy price action form. And then we have this very, very large candle here. And this was formed on Tuesday, and this was during CPI. And we can see that led to that swing break of structure. We then saw our internal structure continue. So we saw a small pullback, not significant enough for me to mark as a swing pullback compared to our previous price action. We continued to the downside. We then saw price push up during Wednesday, and we actually had a bullish internal break of structure, and this provided a really strong signal that our swing pullback was now starting, and we could begin to look for some longs to play the swing pullback, ideally into that 4 hour supply zone that we had marked out, which is also within our daily supply zone. And also, if we look to the left, we have a lot of imbalance within this candle here. You can see it's just one clean push during CPI. And so we can mark that as a huge amount of imbalance that price may want to target. Obviously, it doesn't have to, but it's something that we can sort of look at and anticipate that price might want to do. And then, yeah, that brings us to the morning of Thursday. As you can see, this is 7 a.m. So when I'm getting to my desk and conducting my analysis, and very quickly, if we look at this internal range, we can see that we had a very small internal high formed. We had a small pullback, quite a lot of low volume here. I think this did happen during sort of end of New York, coming into Asian session. We had a very small sweep of liquidity here, which tapped into our M15 flip demand zone, which led to that internal bullish break of structure, and was also part of a very strong demand chain from the extreme. Obviously, lots of resting liquidity here, which might be targeted, but we won't know until price pushes lower. And at this point, coming into Thursday morning, we had a bit of a range forming, arguably, because we had a sweep of our weak M15 internal high, also a sweep of our Asian low. Not really the cleanest price action, so I was either waiting for price to push to the upside and close above our internal high, so we had a bullish internal break of structure, or to push to the downside and see if we could get any sort of medium time frame confirmation within our 4-hour demand. But as you can see, if we play price forward, the next candle, I think, we do get that internal break of structure, and that's what I had marked out here. So we can mark that as a internal break of structure on our M15. And at this point, I was very happy to continue looking for those longs to play that swing pullback up into our 4-hour supply. And if we look at our various POIs that we could look for, we obviously have our internal low in here. Just checking the lows, it would be there. And so we technically have a very small extreme demand here, sorry. I'll mark this out. It's really not the cleanest, as it's a very small POI itself. And I think it was formed during Asian. So yeah, this is technically our Asian low as well. So not the strongest, could easily be swept. And we do have some nice liquidity resting above with these two flip zones here. But another zone I would be looking for would be this flip zone. So we can see price pushed up into our supply zones up here. We had that reaction failed, and that reaction actually led to our internal break of structure. So a very strong flip zone here, definitely an area I'd be looking to look for longs from, but also cautious that we could sweep through that to target our extreme demand here, or also target our Asian low, where price may want to sweep liquidity in there. But otherwise, yeah, very valid to look for longs from this POI. And that is what I was doing coming into Thursday morning. So we were simply waiting to see if price would retrace into our POI. And if we play price forward one more candle, we can see that's exactly what happens. And at this point, I was jumping down to my lower time frame, which is the M1 for me. And I was looking for those entry confirmations to see if I could take any longs within this POI, or also to see if we would get a sweep of either of these two lows, or a mitigation of this POI below. But yeah, definitely jumping down to my lower timeframes at this point to see if we could get any of our confirmation entries. Now, just before we jump down to the M1, one thing I need to note is that this POI itself had no inducement resting above it. I like to call this leg inducement. And basically, it's the opposite of what we have for this POI. So for this POI here, we can see we have this flip demand above, and there could be a lot of people, myself included, looking to take longs from this POI. If people are taking just an entry on the M15, you'd have your entry there. You would likely have your stop loss just below, which means there is a lot of liquidity resting above this POI, which means price may target all of that liquidity, mitigate this POI, and then continue its bullish structure. Whereas for this POI here, we have no clear leg inducement. And what this means is that when I go down to the lower time frame to look for my entries, I'm going to need to wait for a very clear liquidation to occur on the M1, or some really clear pullback inducement to occur for a more aggressive risk entry on the M1. So that's just something that I look for in my trading at the moment, and something that will make more sense once we jump down to the lower time frame. So if we jump down to the M1, the very first thing I like to do with my POIs is refine it as much as I can to our M1. And that would be our M1 extreme candle here. As you can see, this is the extreme of the M15 demand. As you can see, it's the lowest point within this POI. And it also led to a fairly strong reaction. We can see price came down quite impulsively, pushed away, and eventually led to that M15 internal break of structure. And at this point, as I was mentioning, For my setups for this POI, I needed to see very clear inducement or liquidation form on our lower time frame to look for an entry. And we actually have some of that forming already. As we can see, prices pulled down into our POI. We've had this very small retracement candle here. Prices continue to the downside. And then we've actually had a bullish change of character here. So we can mark that in with our M1 change of character. And what this does is it generates a lot of inducement below. And we can mark that out like so. And basically, the reason this creates inducement is a lot of people trading, ICT, SMC, anything like that, will look at this POI. They say, okay, I want to go down to the M1, wait for a confirmation entry. And usually that confirmation entry will be a change of character as such, where we see price break above that sort of fractal high. And they'll be looking for longs like this. They'll come into that M1 demand, have their stop loss, I don't know, just below, be targeting that high. And quite often what we'll see is price will actually liquidate that low and break through all of their orders, as that is just a false move to generate liquidity. Now, at this point, I was looking for a confirmation entry. So we've had price come into our POI. We've seen a liquidation occur as we've had that change of character, prices swept the low. So for a confirmation entry, I'd be looking for price to break our PBL, which is the point before liquidation. And I'd also be waiting for an M1 change of character up here to look for an entry. But as we can see, if we continue, price taps into our point before liquidation, so our PBL, and actually continues to the downside. If I play price forward one more candle, you can see. So in this case, our PBL has held, and that's something that's a big red flag for me. I always want to see the PBL fail to confirm that the liquidation has occurred. So yeah, deleted that at the point. I wanted to wait for a new liquidation for our confirmation entry, but at the same time, I was actually happy to look for an M1 risk entry. Now, this was what I was saying earlier, where I wanted to refine my our M15 demand to our M1 extreme. And because we've had that M1 pullback inducement form, we didn't have that M15 leg inducement, but we've had this clear pullback inducement form. At this point, I was actually happy to set my order on the M1 with my risk entry. And I had this set at this point. I actually had it set as soon as we had this first change of character. And I was just waiting to see if price would mitigate that M1 extreme. Now, this is obviously a lot more risky, a more aggressive type of entry, as you're not waiting for that confirmation as we were looking for here. You are sort of anticipating that price is going to use this inducement for the M1 extreme, but obviously price could just push through this POI and we would be tagged into and straight out of our position if that does happen. But it's something that I've done a lot of back testing on. When I see this sort of price action form on the M1 within our M15 POIs, it can be quite high probability depending on the medium time frame phase that you're trading. So for this setup, I was very happy to set this, especially as we said on the M15, because we have this huge imbalance to the left. I thought it was very likely that we could see price continue this bullish structure all the way up into our 4-hour and M15 supply. So I did have my order set there. I won't go into targets just yet. We'll continue on the M1 because there were a few other possible entries you could have taken. We'll continue to play price forward. As you can see, very slowly approaching our entry. Now, what we have here is we see price make a small break to the downside, and I believe we get another change of character. Yep, so if we look here, we can see price has made a break to the downside. Actually, no, I was wrong. I thought that was a retracement candle, but I don't believe it is. So we don't have any more. Spoke too soon. Now we have our inducement created. So we have another change of character here. As you can see, prices come up. We have had that change of character. Arguably, we do have our PBL eventually fail, but as I mentioned, price had already tapped into our PBL and created a new lower low, which meant that I wasn't really looking for a confirmation entry from this level. I was waiting for a new liquidation to occur. And as you can see, we do have more inducement forming below this low now, because again, we're going to have people looking for longs from a POI within here, so something like here, because they've waited for that change of character, and they will be looking for longs from one of these M1 candles. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that because it would depend on their individual strategy. But all that's important to note is that there is a lot of liquidity resting below here. And again, this just provides even more confluence for this M1 extreme for our risk entry. We actually have two sets of inducement forming now. and we'll play price forward to see what happens. As you can see, we actually have a pretty strong reaction there, and we can see price ranges around a little bit here before we eventually come down, and we do get a liquidation at some point eventually. So we see a little range on the M1 forming, and I believe if we drag this along, we get a liquidation here. As you can see, prices liquidated this low, left a really nice wick actually. I'm just going to hide our risk entry for the moment just to clean this up a little bit, because there was a valid confirmation entry here also. So we've had that liquidation. If I was looking for a confirmation entry here, which I was in the live market, I would be waiting for our PBL to fail and for an M1 change of character. Our M1 change of character would be here. Our PBL would also be this little flip zone here, as this supply zone has led to that liquidation. We want to see that fail to confirm the liquidation. And we can see on the very next candle, we do actually break above. So we have our PBL fail, and we also get an M1 change of character. And there definitely was a valid confirmation entry here. If you were looking for it, probably had a 2.5 pip stop loss, and you'd be targeting at least that M15 internal high. But as we can see, we actually get a brand new liquidation again. As price continues through, you would have been liquidated within that position, but that's not to worry. Again, just providing even more confluence for our M1 extreme, which as we know was left unmitigated until this point. And this was the entry that I took. And this was where I was tagged into my position. So as we mentioned on the M15, if we go back up, we can see we had no clear leg inducement for this M15 flip zone we were looking to take longs from. That meant on the M1, I needed to see either clear liquidation or clear pullback inducement. We actually had 3 sets of pullback inducement, all of them formed with a M1 bullish change of character. There definitely was a valid confirmation entry in here. This was something I actually missed in the live market. I was too focused actually waiting on price to mitigate our M1 extreme. Definitely a valid trade though, and something I've since added to my journal. So yeah, a valid loss there, and we can see price then mitigates our M1 extreme. And at this point, I was in my trade. And just before we begin to play price forward, I will tell you what I was doing for my targets. So at the moment, we had our clear internal structure. We have our internal high here. Now, if our internal structure is going to continue, and price is going to approach this 4-hour daily supply that we were anticipating with our higher time frame analysis at the start of the morning, we can expect price to definitely break this high. It is a weak high as we have this bullish structure. We will be anticipating price to make a new internal higher high, ideally making this point our new higher low, but we won't find that out until price breaks this level. So this was my first target. Our internal high was about 4.84R. So yeah, a nice target, nothing too crazy. And then the final target, and I was really looking to, hold this trade as far as I possibly could. This is a sort of test I gave myself within this trade actually to see how long I could hold it, make sure I kept my psychology sort of in place. I've had issues before where I've been closing trades too early, second guessing myself, especially when we start to see, nice profits on our open positions. So my final target actually was our M15 refined 4-hour supply. Now, I didn't mention this earlier, but I had refined it to our final buy before the sell. I didn't want to refine it too far to this little pivot candle up here because it was very small. So I wanted to be a bit less aggressive. And yeah, it was that final buy before the sell that did eventually lead to our swing break of structure. So technically a valid flip zone. And as we can see, it's actually also working as our swing extreme. So we have our swing high up here. We have our extreme supply. Price has mitigated that extreme supply. So if we're following our supply chain, we have a very, very strong level of supply here. And that would be where I'd be, possibly anticipating price to make a strong reaction from, continue our swing bearish structure. So a very good place to take the rest of our targets. As you can see, that has a final RR of 22. And yeah, we'll jump back down to the M1. I'll show you how I managed this trade, how you could have chosen to manage this trade. I know some people like to use fixed targets, so you could have gone for a 5-hour fixed target or something down here. Again, that'd be quite similar to our internal high. Yeah, I won't go too much into trade management. As I said, I am doing a lot of work at the moment on trade management, finding what works best for my strategy. And I will show you how I manage this trade. And yeah, we'll jump down to it. If you do want more information on trade management, perhaps I can do a whole video on that. I've already done one previously on a trailing stop loss, and that is something I actually used within this trade. So if we jump down to the M1, we'll begin to play price forward. As you can see, we see a really nice reaction from that M1 extreme. Another thing to note here is that we do then have that bullish change of character on the M1. So we again actually had another confirmation entry. As you can see, I'll just hide this position slightly. We had that M1 change of character, we had that liquidation. Obviously, there was a valid confirmation entry within there. But if you perhaps didn't want to take the risk entry, I know a lot of people that I trade with within the Discord server don't particularly like these risk entries. As I've mentioned, they're quite aggressive and, as the name suggests, quite risky. But there was now a confirmation entry setting up, and we would have had this M1 POI to look for longs from, and it definitely would have been valid if you weren't already in this risk entry to look for the confirmation entry here. Again, 2.5 pip stop loss looks quite nice to cover that low, and you could be targeting at least that M15 internal high. And I'll just leave that in there because that's definitely a valid trade, but considering I was already in our risk entry, it wasn't something I was looking to take until I was at least risk-free on that. As you can see, price comes into that demand zone. Just hide that again slightly, and this would have been a really nice entry. As we can see, we do have a very small liquidation, but with that 2.5 pip stop loss, I think it was around here, you would have been fine. And we can see price then does continue to the upside eventually. And I'll begin to talk you through how I was managing this trade. So as you would have seen for my 1 hour strategy, I like to use a trailing stop loss. This works really well in trending markets. It means you can sort of maximize your profits and only get taken out once price begins to show weakness and begins to show signs that the trend may be ending. So I've been trialing out using this on the M1 with my entries for my sort of SMC based strategy. And yeah, I've been following sort of larger M1 swing structure. So you can see price made a nice push to the upside here. We had a fairly significant pullback. We did have a very small liquidity sweep here, and price then continued to the upside. So I was happy to mark this out as an M1 break of structure. And at this point, I was moving my stop loss to, let me go back, to 0.5 pips below our sort of M1 swing low. As we can see here, our low here was 1.07280. So my stop loss would have been moved to 1.07275. So it would have been this level here. And I will just mark that with the little red line here. So I was able to reduce my risk very slightly, gone from a 2.5 pip stop loss to a 2 pip stop loss. And yeah, continuing to see if price would continue to the upside. Again, remaining patient. This point, this wasn't a significant pullback for me to, begin to move up my stop loss to mark this as an M1 break of structure. I was simply waiting for a more significant pullback as such. And then at this point, I was simply waiting to see if price would continue to the upside again. So we can see we have a large sort of range form very quickly as well. If I just hide this, I'm going to jump up to the M15. And let's say after our internal break of structure, you weren't sure whether to look at this POI or our POI below. You could have waited for medium time frame confirmation. And as we can see within this POI here, if I can make it a bit larger to make it clearer, quite messy price action, not the cleanest. We can see price makes a push down. We have those 2 retracement candles here. Price continues to the downside, and then we actually have an M15 change of character here. We can mark that out as such. And after this change of character, you then have medium time frame confirmation that this POI is going to hold. So that adds, even extra confluence to your trade that you might be wanting to look for longs. That also means we have a new M15 demand zone that you could look for longs from. Again, I did have this marked out, but at this point, I was still had risk on the table on my M1 entry. As you can see, our stop loss is still, below our entry, so we do not have any profits locked in yet. But there definitely was a valid entry within our new M15 demand. And as you can see, we do have our M1 extreme candle. If you were looking for a risk entry, is this candle here. I do apologize if I'm going over this quite quickly. I'm just trying to not make this video too long, as some of my other ones have been. But you can see price comes down into our M15 demand, small retracement candle, continue to the downside. Again, small retracement, continue to the downside, and then we do get a bullish change of character here. We would have then been waiting for a clear liquidation to happen. as you can see, price comes down and we do get a liquidation of our M1 low. And then we would be waiting for a change of character for an entry, also a PBL fail as well. And that would be this level up here. We would be waiting for this candle to be broken and arguably this sort of larger supply zone. So we can see price does tap into our supply zone. We could continue to the downside, but as you'll be able to see, we do eventually get, I don't think it's clear enough there, we do eventually get that change of character. Our PBL does fail, so it definitely was a valid confirmation entry within here. Our M1 extreme was already mitigated. If I can just mark this out. M1 extreme was mitigated, as we saw, price had gone into our supply, come back down. So we do have a valid flip zone down here as well. And you definitely could have been looking for entries from within here. Perhaps you don't want to refine so far, so you could have looked at this zone. But I believe price does come down to here. So definitely a valid entry to have been looking from here. Perhaps more high probability than this entry back here because we've waited for that M15 confirmation. So as I mentioned, adding additional confluence to our setup. I usually want at least 2.5 pip stop loss. So perhaps not the best RR to our internal high, but still 3.72. And as you can see, price does come down into our POI, I believe. Let's see if we get that mitigation. You might just miss. So this is probably where your over refinement would mean that you missed a setup. But again, if you had moved to here, you had that 2.5 pip stop loss, RR to the high was 3.4. So again, not awful, but nothing amazing. And as we can see, price does continue to the upside. So I'll just get rid of these drawings. So I just wanted to go over some of the other entries you could have looked at waiting for that medium time frame confirmation. That's our M15 change of character line. So I'm just going to hide that. And I'm also just going to hide this M15 demand just to make it a bit clearer, as well as this down here. Clean it up a little bit. And we're still in our position at this point. And as you can see, we've actually had a very significant M1 swing pullback and an M1 swing break of structure. So at this point, I was moving my stop loss to lock in more profits. Our swing low was down here with the lower 0.7309. So moving my stop loss up to 0.7304 to be half a pip below our swing low. And again, yeah, just waiting for price to continue. As I mentioned, our first target would be our internal high up here. And at this point, I believe we do eventually get an internal break of structure. We do have a fairly significant swing pullback again. So at this point, I would be waiting for price to either trigger my trailing stop loss or break our M1 high to lock in more profit. And yeah, just remaining patient during this time, waiting for price to show us what it wants to do. And as we can see, we do get a closure above here. So we do have that M1 swing break of structure. And at this point, I was again moving my stop loss to 0.5 pips below our M1 low. So at this point, at this level, and if we jump up to the M15, I'll be able to bring this down for you slightly, and we can see what sort of level we had locked in. So at this point, we had about 1.6% locked in, so pretty decent. And price was approaching our M15 internal high, which we were expecting to be run. And as we can see, we do have a bit of a pullback, and then we see price break through that high. At this point, I believe it was 4.84R. I took off 75% of my position, so the majority of my position, and I had 25% still running. And with the remaining 25%, I was continuing to use this trailing stop loss all the way up to that M15 refined 4-hour and also daily supply. And yeah, I'll continue to play price forward. We obviously do now have an internal break of structure on our M15, so we can mark that out. And we do also have our confirmed higher low or internal higher low as this point here, which is obviously where we got into our trade. So a really, really good area to get involved in our trade. And I will continue to play price forward. As we can see, we do continue very nicely to the upside. Again, waiting for significant pullbacks. As you can see, it's a very small pullback compared to our recent price action. Not something I'm going to mark out as our M1 swing structure. And one important thing to note is, once we play price forward a little bit, at this point here, definitely happy to mark that as swing structure. So we had another M1 swing break of structure, and I was moving my stop loss up to see where it is, 26021. And if we jump back up to the M15, we'll be able to see how much we had locked in at this point. So at this point, we then had our remaining 25% locked in at 5.04%. Obviously, we'd already taken our 75% partials at this level. So a really nice amount of profit locked in. And we were coming into, so the time now was 1:21 p.m. And we did have some high impact news coming out at 13:30. Because I had this profit locked in and I only had 25% of my position remaining, I was happy to hold through the news. Usually, if I was full risk on this position, I probably would have closed the majority of it, if not all of it, before the news, just to make sure I locked in some profit. But because we had this trading stop loss, I was more than happy to either, see if price continued to the upside, or if it did come against us, at least I'd already secured, really, really healthy profits. So at this point, I was just waiting for news to come out. And as we can see, news does go in our direction. So we had a really nice spike to the upside. Obviously, there was a risk that this could happen to the downside. Likely would have got slipped quite a bit on our trading stop loss, but I was happy to take that risk primarily because we had already taken off at 75%. And yeah, at this point, again, just simply following M1 structure, you can see after this news candle, we do have a large M1 range form. And eventually we do see price continue to the upside. There we go. So we do have another M1 swing break of structure. This point allowed me to move my trading stop loss again. This time locking in even more profits. I believe it would be 4.7. So we go up there. And if we look at our profits now, they would be locked in at around about 10R now. So really, really nice trade. Again, shows the beauty of using a trailing stop loss. If you had been looking at, I don't know, a 5R fixed target, you obviously would have been taken out around this level. Still very, very nice trade to take that 5R. Makes it a lot easier to just sort of set and forget. But with using this trading stop loss, you can really maximize those profits when we're in a trending market. So locked in at 10R, we are targeting this POI up here, which was 22R. And as you can see, price continues to the upside really nicely. We get fairly close to our POI. We see fairly significant pullback. Again, at this time, I'm sure a lot of people would be thinking, oh, maybe I should have just closed here at, I don't know, probably 20R, 21R, 21.4R. We're only 0.6R from our target. But as I mentioned before, set myself the target to just follow this trade no matter what with this trading stop loss. We had this large target. If it doesn't hit it, it doesn't matter. We're already locked in at 10R on our remaining 25%, but it doesn't matter anyway, because as you can see, price does continue to the upside and we do eventually mitigate that POI for a total of 22R. And that was where we closed out the trade. That was my final 25% closed here. We did have an M1 break of structure just before here, and I had actually moved my stop loss up to 0.5 pips below this low. I'm not going to look at the exact value, but somewhere around here. And yeah, that was how we were able to, really capitalize on this internal structure. And again, most importantly, this huge imbalance to the left. We thought price may want to target it, and we were correct. And by using that trailing stop loss, we were really able to maximize those profits and ensure, that we were able to follow that bullish trend as far as we possibly could. Really good area to take targets as well. This was a very strong supply level. So we can see on our 4 hour, it was the flip zone, obviously a fractal flip zone in this case, because we refined it to the wick, but it did lead to that swing break of structure. And it was also our daily flip zone that led to our internal break of structure. So a very strong level of supply. Wasn't really looking to hold it through here. It was possible price continued to the upside, but you're taking quite a large risk there. This was a level I was definitely happy to look for targets from. And as we can see, this imbalance has been completely filled now. So even more likely the price may now drop to the downside. So that pretty much summarizes the whole trade. Apologies if that went on for a bit long and I was rambling in certain places. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to leave a like, a comment, and of course, subscribe to the channel. And as I've mentioned at the start of the video, I will be looking to release much more regular content from April once I'm back from Australia. So if you guys have any ideas for content at all that you want to see, if you want to see more videos like this on a regular basis, where I'm giving you full breakdowns of my trades taken that week or in previous weeks. Just again, let me know in the comments. Let me know if you have any ideas for other trade videos. I did have one suggestion on Instagram recently about going into trade management. And so I'll definitely be doing a video on, risk management, not trade management. So I'll definitely be doing a video on risk management and how you can make sure that you're using correct risk management, especially when it comes to prop firm trading. But otherwise, yeah, drop all of your suggestions below and I'll be sure to look at each one of them and add it to the plan. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great month and I'll catch you once I'm back from Australia. Cheers, guys.